Now comes last but not the least the cruise performance. Understanding cruise performance is very important. When we talk about cruise performance, there are a lot of variables that define cruise performance like true airspeed, fuel consumption rate, range, endurance, etc. Manufacturers provide cruise performance charts in the POH. They will give you a close approximation of the actual performance. But when you have a slight deviation from the conditions upon which the calculations are based on in the cruise performance chart, you will have to keep in mind that there might be significant deviations in the actual performance of the airplane. For example, many cruise performance charts are based on standard atmosphere with zero winds. During flight planning, you must compensate for the winds aloft and the non-standard temperature conditions and use the new flight times that take into account the effects of these conditions. You should remember that wind has a significant effect on the distance an aircraft can fly, but no effect on its rate of fuel consumption or the total time aloft. And this is simply because of the change in your ground speed with winds. In selecting your cruising speed, you usually want to cover the distance to be traveled in the least amount of time or the shortest period. But there are many other factors that might influence your decision. For example, there may be times when you want to use minimum amount of fuel or stay aloft for the greatest period of time. If you understand the trade-offs between these different variables of performance like the time, power, fuel consumption, range, and speed, you will be able to make the best choice to maximize the performance and pleasure and utility of your flights. A simple example would be flying at slower speeds at a reduced RPM setting or throttle settings might increase your time aloft significantly and increase your endurance. Just like we had different climb speeds for different climb performance, we do have certain cruising speeds for definite performance. Three important speeds are the maximum level flight speed, the maximum endurance speed, and the maximum range speed. These speeds have been determined by the manufacturer and balance the combination of available power, fuel economy, lift, and drag to obtain the best possible performance for the situation described. In level flight, what do you think? The maximum speed of the airplane is limited by the amount of power produced by the engine and the total drag generated by the aircraft. Now, if thrust exceeds the drag, when you apply power, the airplane accelerates. When the force of total drag becomes equal to the force of thrust, you maintain your speed. When you are at full possible thrust and the total drag becomes equal to that full thrust, the airplane is now flying at its maximum level speed. You cannot go faster than this. Next on the list is maximum range speed. Maximum range speed is the speed that allows the airplane to fly the greatest distance for a given amount of fuel. This speed is determined by considering the speed and rate of fuel consumption at a given power setting. The settings which yield the greatest distance traveled per gallon of fuel burned is the power setting which provides the maximum range speed. Now, how does this happen? What happens at maximum range speed is that the total drag of the airplane is minimum and you have just enough amount of lift produced to maintain altitude. Hence, this is where the lift to drag ratio is the greatest. Because of having the maximum lift to drag ratio, you are able to use the minimum amount of fuel to go the furthest amount of distance. And now, the final speed that we'll talk about is the maximum endurance speed. The speed and power setting which allows the airplane to remain aloft in the air for the longest possible time is called the maximum endurance speed. It uses minimum amount of power necessary to maintain flight and may be thought of as the speed that provides you the maximum time or hours per gallon as opposed to range which was giving you the maximum miles per gallon. You get it? Alright. If you have questions, of course, make sure to leave them on the comments below. I will try to explain it. Let's take a look at this graph to understand maximum level flight speed. This is a very simple graph. On the x-axis, you see the speed. On the y-axis, you see power required. As you can see, to increase your speed, the amount of power required is also increased. There is a line for maximum available power. As you increase your speed, your power increases or the amount of power required increases when you want to increase your speed. There is a point reached where the power required line meets the maximum available power line. This is the point where maximum level flight speed is achieved. Why is that? This is because at this point, the engine cannot produce any more power. It is at its maximum available power. So you cannot create any more thrust beyond this point to accelerate the airplane. Hence it is the maximum level flight speed. You cannot go faster than this. An important feature of this graph is that at lower airspeeds, you see a reversal in the trend of the curve. Why is that? This region is called the region of reverse command or the reverse command region. As you see, even an increase in the power cannot increase your airspeed when you are performing in the reverse command region. There is a reason for it, and I'll give you a quick note after this to explain why is the reverse command region occurring. Let's take a look at this graph to aerodynamically understand how maximum range speed occurs and how maximum endurance speed occurs. Now again, if you look at the same graph with a different perspective, it will explain to you the maximum endurance speed and the maximum range speed. We will not go into the details of this, but take a look at the basic things. If you look at it, at the lowest point on the curve, you will find a speed for which the amount of power required is minimum. Hence, this produces the maximum endurance speed because there is minimum amount of power required to maintain speed. Minimum amount of power is minimum consumption of fuel. When the fuel consumed is minimum, you can fly for a longer period of time. The maximum range speed occurs at the speed that gives you the maximum lift to drag ratio, which we have talked about in the aerodynamics chapter. Please take a look at the aerodynamics chapter. It would be really helpful for you to understand all of these performance characteristics very easily. Now that we know these three cruising speeds, let's get pilot Chintan Patel and help us understand the cruise charts of our POH.